Look, it's the Canadian Rockies. Well, sort of. Hey, welcome to another video. I'm going to do a couple of videos about my recent trip to Banff National Park up in Alberta, Canadian Rockies. In this one, I'll show you a couple images, but mostly I want to talk about the logistics and what camera gear I used. Did I make any mistakes? That type of thing. And then in the next one, we'll talk more about where I went and show, I don't know, 20, 25 images. And that'll be more of the photography-oriented one. This one's more of the gear-oriented one and the logistics, just so you know. So there'll be at least one more video about Banff. Regular followers of my channel know that I live in South Florida. So getting up there took exactly, on the way there, it took exactly 12 hours to the minute for us to leave the house and then actually touch down in Calgary. Most people, when they go there, they'll fly into Calgary. Because it took us so long to get there, there is a hotel right in the terminal in Calgary Airport. There's a Marriott. And if you're not too budget type, that's where I would stay. That's where we stayed. We stayed in the Marriott because by the time we got there, it was dinner time. And it's another hour and a half up into Banff, and I didn't want to drive a road in the dark that I was unfamiliar with and try to find our Airbnb when I know you have GPS and everything, it'll get you there, but still, I preferred not to do that in the dark and also being tired from traveling all day. So we stayed in the Marriott, and for us, it was the right thing to do. The next morning, you can get up, you walk right across a small street. There's a parking garage that has all the rental car places. And yes, we did rent a car. Do you have to rent a car when you go there? Not necessarily. Again, I preferred it just because of the freedom to be able to get around. But once you get into Banff, they have a very good public transportation system. There's a lot of shuttles, there's a lot of buses, there's a lot of ways to get around. So once you're in Banff, you don't necessarily have to have a rental car. Parking is really difficult there. You can park for free at the train station. Parking closer to town is pretty difficult. Fortunately, where we stayed, we had our own parking spot that we got with our rental of the Airbnb, so it was a lot easier for us to have that rental car to be able to park there. We did take a shuttle to Moraine Lake and Lake Louise, and I would highly recommend that, whether you take the public bus or one of the private shuttles. We took a private shuttle. The other thing that I wasn't aware that the owner told me and another Canadian told me, we went in mid to late September, and that time of year they have a lot of just blue skies. We didn't get rain at all. There was one day where it looked like rain and it got cloudy for a little while, and there were some scattered clouds here and there throughout the week, but for the most part it was just bright blue skies. For me, I don't mind working in black and white. And again, for people that watch my channel, you know that I've begun printing in platinum again. So the blue skies didn't bother me quite as much as maybe it would some other pure landscape photographers. Anyway, that's the logistics of it. Again, when we left, when we drove back to Calgary, because we had an early flight the next morning, and we actually got up at, I don't know, 4:45 even to get the flight, and we were in the terminal. So we stayed again at the Marriott on the way out. Had we stayed at our Airbnb, we would have had to get up at 1 or 2 in the morning and drive in the dark, and it just much easier to go later in the afternoon the day before, check into the hotel, get a few hours sleep, then get up for our 7 o'clock flight, and we got out. And even in the Calgary airport, which they said wasn't crowded at the time, and it really wasn't, we had to go through customs at the Calgary airport, not in Newark when we arrived in Newark. And even though the lines weren't that long, to get through security and get through customs to get back on the American side, or at least be cleared to land back in the United States, it was probably close to an hour. And I know in the United States now you don't have to take off your shoes and those kind of things. In Canada, you still did. We had to take off our shoes and take off my shirt, I had a windbreaker on. You had to take that off. Everything out of your pockets. You know, they go through your camera bag pretty heavily. Even when we went from West Palm, when we flew out of West Palm, man, they just tore apart my camera bag. So be aware if you're traveling with a camera bag. All right, now let's get down into some of the gear that I took. I didn't really want to go heavy. Normally, I take a Shimoda bag, a backpack, and I have 2 camera bodies and 3 or 4 lenses. I just didn't want to do it this time. So what I ended up doing a week or so before we took the trip, I bought this Wandered bag. It's a shoulder bag, and it worked out really well. Initially, I bought the 6-liter bag, and I found that it was a little too tight. It wasn't quite enough. And this isn't necessarily a review of this bag, but it actually worked out really well. It has some nice pockets inside, and it even has some so that you could put in your batteries. There's the missing memory card I've been looking for. How about that? It worked out really well. Also has pockets in the front, which is where I put my lens cleaners and things like that. It's a very lightweight bag, pretty much waterproofed. I don't know that I would dump it in one of the lakes and hope that it stayed dry, but as far as going out into a rainstorm and things like that, I'd be comfortable with it. And it also has a back packet, which is where I had put some papers, some travel papers that I'm old school. I like to have hard copies of papers of boarding passes and things like that instead of everything on my phone. Everything was on my phone anyway, but still I like to have backups. So that's where I had put those. This is a pretty comfortable, rests against your back. It's pretty comfortable. This is a nice little bag. Again, for me, I found that I needed the 9-liter. 6-liter was just a little too tight. If I had like an OEM or a smaller camera body, then the 6-liter would have been fine. But for me, for what I took, and I didn't take a lot of gear, which we'll talk about in just a second, I needed the 9-liter. Now, what did I take? And did I make any mistakes? I took my Nikon Z8, which fit in the middle section of that bag rather easily. I also use an L bracket because I took my tripod. Do you need a tripod to go there? I used it a couple of times, so I don't regret taking it. And if you don't mind taking a tripod, then I would recommend taking a tripod. Again, I only used it a couple of times. Now I know, like when we went to, say, Moraine Lake, Lake Louise, Pado Lake, unless you go at a really off time, you're going to have a hard time with a tripod because there's just people everywhere, even in mid-September. People are everywhere, and they're going to be bumping you and bumping your tripod, and it's, you know, unless you go in the winter and there's 3 people up there. When you go to Moraine Lake, you have to walk up what's called the rock pile, and if you're 25, you can run right up that rock pile. When you're in your mid to later 60s, it takes a couple of breaths out of you, especially because we live at sea level and below sea level even. Going up 7,000, you know, being in 8,000 feet and having to go up there. I know when we got to Moraine Lake, me personally, I had a coughing fit. And I looked it up later, it was some sort of asthmatic, they called it some sort of asthmatic exercise fit. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, But it's not if you're older, it's not just this easy walk up to the view at Moraine Lake where everybody sees, and also Peyto Lake as well. Peyto Lake is 700 meters, and it's almost straight up. It's only 700 meters, but there's a couple of parts where for about 100, 150 meters, you almost go straight up. And again, you can get there. It's just you have to take your time. Now, if you're used to higher elevations, it'll be a little bit easier for you. But I know for me, I had to stop a couple of times, get my breath, calm down. My heart rate was up pretty good, and then I could eventually get to the top. So just be aware of that. Not impossible, you can do it, but it's not a flat, easy walk to get to some of these locations. Some of them are Bow Lake, Herbert Lake, Two Jack Lake, Cascade Ponds, and Quarry Lake. All those are flat, slight elevations maybe at times, much easier to get to. I had no problem. 80-90% of the lakes I had no problem getting to. But there are a couple of them where you have to go up into some elevation. But that's why I didn't carry a tripod to those locations. A, it was just too busy, and B, I just didn't want to take the weight getting up there. And you can see by this pano of Peyto Lake, that's a handheld panorama. So I didn't need my tripod for that. If it was sunrise or sunset and low light and I had longer exposures, you might have needed a tripod, but there'd also probably be less people at the viewing sites and you could set up a tripod. So again, if you're 35 and you're used to elevations, tripod's not going to be any issue. You get to be past 65 and it's a little bit tougher. So just be aware of that. In those locations, a lot of locations, not a problem at all. Okay, the lenses. I took the Nikon 24-120 F4 S lens. I take this pretty much everywhere when I travel. This is, in my opinion, the ultimate travel lens for the Nikon Z system. It just is. It doesn't matter where I go. I use this 80% of the time, maybe more. And I did again. You can't beat this lens. I know people for travel, for landscapes, they're going to use a wider aperture at times. Some people might even use the 100 to 400s. I did not take, I don't own a 100 to 400 at this time anyway. I have a 70 to 300, but I didn't take it partially because it wouldn't really fit in my bag like that. Then I would have had to take my backpack, and I wanted to travel lighter. And secondly, I just felt like I didn't need it. There were maybe at most 2 times that I wish I had a longer reach than 120, maybe into the 200, 300 range. But that wouldn't have been worth it enough for me to go from the Wandered bag to the Shimoda bag and carrying that backpack. It wouldn't have made enough difference for me to carry that bigger lens. For other people, for the way you photograph, that's up to you. For me, it wasn't worth it. The other lens I took, and if I were to go again, I would not take this particular lens. However, I took it for a specific reason, and that is the Typoch 28 1.4 lens for the Z system. I took this because I just got it not long ago and I really wanted to use this lens. That's why I took it. I took it for the downtown type shots along the streets and an occasional landscape shot like this one here. So I don't regret taking this lens. I knew what I was doing when I was taking it. However, if I didn't have this lens, there were times I wish I had, say, a 16 to 35, which again, I don't own right now. I own a 20 millimeter. And there were times I wish I had the 20 millimeter. So if you have a 16 to 35 and you're going to Banff or any national park like that, for me, a 16 to 35 and the 24 to 120 will do 95% of what you want to do. Unless you're a person that likes to zoom in on the top of those mountains, then okay, maybe you want a 100 to 400. But for me, I don't photograph that way. I knew when I was going, I wanted to take some images of the people and the surroundings of downtown on Banff Avenue and some of those places. And because next year's trip, we're going to Europe, and I intend to take this, or at least I think I will, take this Typoch lens, I really wanted to work it out. I really wanted, and I spent the better part of 2 days just using this lens around town. The other days I spent with the 24 to 120. As far as how many days you need to spend there, really depends on how busy you want to stay. For us, because, and we did a lot of walking, I mean, I lost 3 pounds going there, we took some downtime. In other words, we didn't go crazy 12, 14-hour days. We would get up. One morning, we went to Cascade Lake, and I got that image. And I will tell one quick story on that. I'll probably tell it again when I do the next video about all the different lakes we went to. But we got there before sunrise. We're the only people there. The only people. I have my tripod all set up. I'm waiting. And the light is just starting to hit the top of those peaks. And here comes a van full of Chinese tourists. And they all go and stand on the bridge, that bridge in that image. And they're all standing there for 5 minutes, taking selfies, and they're taking pictures of each other. Hey! Hey! And they all have red jackets on, and it's reflecting into the water. I'm thinking, really? Really? So my wife sees that I'm getting frustrated, and she goes over and asks them if they would get off the bridge for just 2 minutes so I can get a couple of shots. I mean, I've been there for a half an hour waiting for the sun to hit the peaks, and it's just now hitting it the way I want it. So she went over, and they were very nice. They're very nice, and she said, hey, where he's standing is the shot anyway. They came over, and of course now I've got one of them on one side of my tripod and one on the other side of the tripod, and occasionally they would stick their iPhone right in front of my lens as I'm taking a picture. Oh, we got that picture. Like, oh, okay. You know, and one of them's asking me, how you doing this and how you doing that? And I'm trying to be polite and answer the question, but it was like, they're the only other people there. Finally, I think I got a pretty good shot. And then we went across the bridge and looked at it from the other side facing the other mountain. Don't ask me the name of all the mountain peaks. I don't remember. And then I got this shot. That was from the opposite side of the lake. The first one is the one that's the iconic shot that everybody takes. Not as many people go across the bridge and go to the other side of the lake and take that shot. There's also some other shots as you walk down the lake a little bit. I just want to do a short video on what I took if I were to go again. It's a beautiful place. I recommend it. I don't know that I would go again just because been there, done that. You know, there's so many places in the world to see. If I lived closer and it was maybe a 3 or 4 hour trip to get there, I would probably go again. Maybe at a different time of year. But it's a beautiful location, especially for photography. I don't regret going. I don't regret going light. I don't really regret taking my tripod. Again, do you need a tripod? You don't have to have one, but I would, if you don't mind carrying a tripod on the plane and everything else, I would take one. Well, the other thing I used a lot was that you need is a polarizer. You definitely need a polarizer, especially when you had all those blue skies. Polarizer. I used a 3-stop or a 6-stop ND filter a couple of times once or twice. I think I used it once on the Cascade Ponds or Cascade Lakes image. But a polarizer, I used that a lot. You definitely need a polarizer. All right, I hope that helps. Again, I'll do another video with maybe some B-roll and a lot more images. I haven't finished processing them all yet. But once I get through that, I'll do another video and we'll talk about the different lakes and maybe what I liked about them and what I didn't. And until then, take good care. See you soon. Thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button, even just because. Be nice to me. I just traveled a long way. Cut me a break. Thanks. See you soon. Bye.